Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make money online. We are live on X. We are live on YouTube. I'm your host, B-Check. I am joined by my English co-host, not actually English, my English co-host, English, host of the Lil Nouns Show, community team of Taproot Wizards, Sugartown, and Zynga, and our resident Bitcoin ordinals expert. Legendary is not available today, bringing in the All Stars to fill in. Can't wait to get in to discuss the show with English in just a second. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. We do not know anything for sure. This modern market is exceptionally risky, so please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, English, how are you doing this Thursday, the 11th of January?
Oh, I'm doing phenomenal. Life is good. We got the ETF approved. I'm on the modern market. I think that's kind of like the meta now. You're on the thread guy. I'm on the modern market. We're doing a little bit of rotations. We're feeling things out. Big things coming in 2024. Big fan of the show, so thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you, man. What do you think of these rotations happening amongst all Twitter spaces?
I think they're dope. I think everybody's stepping up their game. I'm obviously just filling in for Legendary that's on vacation, but I know we had a quick chat, and I think Thread Guy's looking for his Mando to his Farouk. Does that make sense? So yeah, like I even think Farouk made a joke to him, and he's like, oh, you and B Check is like the Wish version of me and Mando, and I which is funny. It's a
how
good
do you
tweet.
know that? Because someone told me that. Is that what everyone's saying?
So he's known for his Thread Guy. Like, so Thread Guy, why his name is Thread Guy is because he started writing threads back in 2021, and he would spend like hours like come up with these threads, and sometimes they would hit, sometimes they wouldn't. And I
Oh,
think he
really?
made
I thought that was a complete meme. I thought
no,
he just never wrote threads and that was just
no.
part of the meme.
That's how he started. He really wanted to be like a Twitter, like famous influencer, whatever you want to call it. And then one time he wrote this shit post and it just hit. And it sparked something in his head. I've heard him tell this story before. And he's like, I could just write something really witty, short, maybe put a picture, and it'll get like 10 times the variety. Like, why am I spending hours doing this? So he writes these takes, like the one that was yesterday is like the Ma glasses is what Nouns glasses wanted to be, or some shit like that. And like any joke, there's maybe a little bit of truth under it, but you make the hot take, the controversial take, and that's what, people will chime in, because there's going to be people from one side to get up in arms, and then the people on the other one comes to rally, and all of a sudden you have virality. So I'm here for it. And I think, going back to the question at hand, I think you are an excellent Mando to his Farouk.
Well, I need to digest that. I think is a compliment, but I need to like put
It is.
myself into the metaphor.
I'm a Mando fan for what it is. So if you are Mando, you're like the creme of the crop. So I'm a Mando fanboy.
Sounds good. That sounds good to me. I want to give you a chance just quickly to let people know about the Little Nouns Show, because very specifically, yes, people know that other people do spaces, and yes, people are always interested in different content, trying to find different voices to listen in from. Why don't you just say a little bit about the Little Nouns Show and also this funding model? Everyone knows already. I'm also sponsored by Little Nouns. They're really awesome. They have sponsored my newsletter for one period of 6 months and then an additional period of 6 months. Why don't you explain like the proposal you actually have live right now that is going to vote and looks like it's going to pass? I think you've got like 800 votes in your favor. It's all part of the process. Why don't you just let people know a little bit about that before we get into the headlines today?
Sure. If you want to pull it up for the people that are on YouTube, we can actually look at the prop live. So Little Nouns DAO is a 1-to-1 fork of Nouns DAO. And I think most people that are in Web3 are familiar with Nouns, at least as a brand, maybe not. And they know it's a DAO, and they don't really necessarily know what that entails. So basically, when you buy the token, instead of the founders using that for their own purposes, basically the community votes on how that treasury money is used. And it's usually used to fund builders, sometimes public goods, anything that's going to proliferate the brand. So you need to rally around some kind of North Star. The North Star is proliferate the meme. So that could be you as a builder and doing something that's good for everybody to use. It could be a public good, something charitable, and is nouns branded, and that brings back like this halo effect back to like just nouns in general. So the premise of Little Nouns DAO, to understand, is there's a lot of sub DAOs, nouns, because it is a protocol. As much as it's an NFT project, it's a protocol, and anybody can fork that. And so Little Nouns was founded by Dot and one other gentleman that I forget his name, but Dot's the most active founder. And he decided, I want a one-to-one fork, give a cheaper price point. You got to remember, nouns were going for 100 ETH plus. And so in the bull market, these might have been 1 ETH. Things have changed.
Yeah.
But
They were a lot more expensive back then. Now I think you
correct.
can mint one for 0.15, and on secondary they're a little bit less.
For sure.
But tell the people about this specific proposal, English,
Sure.
because I think ultimately one of the things people want to know is, yes, there's 544 ETH in this treasury. I've spoken
Over a
about
million dollars. Over $1 million.
over $1 million.
Yeah.
Tell people about the value of your proposal and how that process works.
Yeah. So I mean, so we've done the Little Noun show, and I think a lot of people in Nouns DAO don't really degen as much. I mean, some of them might, but they're just in their echo chamber. And then so we also wanted to basically have like a cross pollination platform where we showcase builders to the outside and vice versa. So we also showcase other people doing outside, so we can kind of educate the people in Nouns. So that allows exposure to the Little Nouns DAO itself. So we had the other day, we were fortunate to have good things from formerly from OCM. We had Henry from CyberKongs. I could go on. So that was the last show. We talked about ordinals, gave some ordinal educations, but we had tons of people that were never exposed to Little Nouns come on the show, listen to like their favorite people talk, and then it kind of cross pollinates a little bit. So I think the idea is that it gives exposure to Little Nouns, and at the same time we provide a fun show and is entertainable. So a lot of times the Little Nouns show is actually used as like something that the DAO is proud of, that we
Yeah.
funded. It's like we funded this and we're proud of this. And so it also has like a marketing approach to it. So I'm very proud. We've been funded 3 times for 4 times for 3 months, and this is a 6-month proposal. So it's pretty big, and shout out to Nouns DAO. So if you do have an
Very,
idea, go ahead.
yeah, very, very big. 36 ETH proposal, right?
Yeah, that's 36 ETH split among,
Amongst a
yeah,
bunch of people. So yeah,
yeah. Yeah. There's 3 primary people and 2 support teams. The two people in the support, they predominantly have a small role in the show, but they find guests and do some back end work. So they're
really
supportive.
awesome. That's
Thank
so awesome. And I think just as a reminder to people, there are all kinds of DAOs out there, Lil Nouns DAO being one of them, Big Nouns being another one of them, with all kinds of funds, just like sitting there waiting for people who are talented, committed, and want to try to do stuff. But one of the precursors to that is like, you've got to be committed, and it's not somewhere that you can just dip in and out. One of the key reasons someone like English gets funded alongside some of the people who are in this proposal with him is because they've been part of the community for a long time. And I think one of the key things when you do want to go to these bigger DAOs to try to attract funding is they need to know that it's not like a hit and run. It's not like come in, dip in, take the funds, and then leave and disappear. So I think that's one of the crucial things for everyone to bear in mind. I know that that's something that everyone does have in their mind because we're online all the time. And we're here on the Modern Market Show trying to figure out ways to be more sustainable on the internet and find these different sources of funding. So super interesting to start with that. Great to have you with us, English, today. Want to get into more of your expertise on like Bitcoin and other things a little bit later. But before we do that, let's get into the headlines, because there were some important headlines that no one would have missed, I don't think. But let's do that, and then we'll get into a discussion on it. So, as always, this information comes to you from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like, because I take quite a lot of time and put that effort into it. So let's get into it, starting with the price action. We have got Bitcoin basically flat. I think it's about up 1% now at 46.3K after the official approvals. The big news, obviously, is that ETH is up 10% has broken 2.6K. Going to really talk about that in just a moment. Solana up a few percent at $100. Ape also up at 1.4. NFT volume across the board. ETH at 16.3, Solana 6.7, BTC at 14.7. Interesting to see that flip back because Solana had really risen up to be on par with ETH for a little bit in terms of the NFT volume. Getting into the headlines, number one, SEC officially approves all Bitcoin ETFs. BTC is up a touch, but ETH rips 10%, as we just said. Number two, on the NFT side, Age of Dino on Exterio mints out at 0.59 ETH and floor price doubles instantly. I hope to be able to touch on that a little bit later, but we'll see where the ETH conversation goes. That Exterio platform is just minting out like crazy, and then the prices just go immediately up. You'll remember that's where Overworld minted not so long ago for 0.15, and those ran to almost 3 ETH at one point. And finally, X removes support for NFT profile pictures. Are NFTs dead, at least on X? We'll try to touch on that too. Getting into some price action, we've got CryptoPunks at 54 ETH. Bored Apes at 22.8, down 5%. Mutants down 7% at 4.3. Bleeding across the board. DGods down 8% at 2.8. Captains at 4. Azuki's at 6.8. Penguins at 10.9. Moonbirds at 1.1, down 14%. A lot of blood on ETH NFTs there. The only strength being in Azuki and Penguins. That's the price action. Those are the headlines. English, what numbers are catching your attention there?
Which numbers out of the snapshot? The first thing that I don't know about numbers, but the first thing that snapped out was the NFTs and the hexagon, and it made me laugh just because I think it's like a big no. It's a big nothing burger basically. I think that was during a time when people were like, "I own this asset. I'll sue you if you own my IP." All this other stuff, and I think we're way past that. Like people are like, "Yeah, go use my PFP if you want. Like I'm cool with it." It was just, I think it's a dinosaur from a relic, and so I laugh at it. I think some people might have taken it seriously, like it actually makes some impact, but I don't. Yeah, just that was a good chuckle from the snapshot. I I didn't get a chance to read it, and it made me laugh.
Yeah, I think it's a funny one. I guess at some point in time, people's sincere hopes were that NFTs would be integrated into everything, and to be able to prove that you were the true owner would be so significant that it would make the underlying assets so much more valuable because you've got that different shape, and therefore you're like true. It's almost like a different layer of verification, right? Like, yes, you're verified on Twitter, but not only that, you are verified owning that particular asset that you're claiming to own. And I think maybe people are just like, well, I don't know, it doesn't really matter that much, does it? Um, However, one of the quick things on this before I want to press you more on the numbers, though, is that I saw something about Elon wanting to try to push Twitter more in the direction of, this money application. And I've also heard that it seems like he's not necessarily going to go in the crypto direction. Wants to, I think it might. I don't really want to misspeak. It was something I've read on the timeline, but I've got a sense that he would rather, control everything internally, have things run through their systems, not on this open, decentralized system. Do you have any thoughts on that aspect, or anything that I just said before?
Yeah, I do have thoughts. I don't think that it necessarily matters in terms of if you're a content creator and you want to get paid. I think it's really comes down to the same thing. You have a centralized organization. So crypto doesn't really provide much value outside. Maybe you don't want to share your bank account. I've heard that argument. And that seems pretty silly. That's pretty common transactional. You give your bank account, your routing number. I think it's more from this philosophical standpoint because Elon was kind of like the poster boy for cryptocurrency. If there's going to be
Mm,
anyone to mass adopt cryptocurrency into like an ecosystem that has tons of money rolling through it, it
yeah.
might have been Elon. He's like the one like outlier, like that one rogue cowboy that will say, fuck you. I don't care about your funding and go fuck yourself. So this was like the guy, right? This is the guy that pumped Doge. This is the rogue guy. So in a way, he was kind of like the champion for crypto and
Mm.
adoption. I think he was even accepting Bitcoin for Tesla at one point. And now he's saying, hey, hold on a second. I got this $46 billion company, and I don't think crypto is necessarily the best route. And people are disappointed.
Yes. He's definitely that kind of poster boy for all of it, and maybe this is quite disappointing for a lot of people to hear that, as I think people thought he might run with the kind of crypto vision, at least for a period of time. Wanted to, before we get into the proper headlines and digest that stuff, just like those headline numbers for me, what stood out was that there's a lot of blood on the ETH NFTs. Bored Apes down 5%, Mutants down 7%, DGod's down 8%, Moonbird's down 14%. Do you see any connection between all of this blood? Like, I know ETH is moving. There's a bit of strength in Pudgy Penguins. They're up 2%. Azukis are steady at 6.8. CryptoPunks haven't moved hugely. They're at 54-ish. What's your instinctive thought on that kind of big movement across the board on these valuable ETH NFTs?
Yeah, I would say there's a few factors going into it. So you still have blur farmers that are actually manipulating floors. They're gonna sweep. I actually saw it on Sugartown yesterday. They sweep 10, then they list and they move it around. So you have a little bit of market manipulation. There's a lot of people that are getting more bullish on this blast blur there. And I think the majority of people believe that there's so much liquidity locked on blast. Maybe the second tier where you get returns is the actual blur token, and that stake, that's a little, because it adds a layer of risk, so they'll always reward that more, but the riskier one is accumulating points. So you have that. Then you have where the phenomenon where in the short term, the very, very short term, as the underlying asset goes up, the actual NFT will go down. But the moment it stabilizes, if it's to the upside, you'll actually see a rally and it'll be worth. So if Pudgies are worth 10, in an imaginary world, they hit 9, maybe 8.5 as ETH runs up. If ETH stabilizes at, let's say, 3K, I wouldn't be surprised to see it at 15. So I think you're seeing a few factors out here, a little market manipulation. People get scared with volatility. But if I had to guess, it would just be that ETH has been, the narrative at least has been, it's been lagging behind alts, behind all, Solana, even Bitcoin. And so now they see the run here and people want to catch that in the short term.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We always see this in the very, very short term when any token runs so aggressively. Sometimes the NFTs can sell off. Wanted to throw to Greggy quickly, one of our long-time listeners, for the maybe first time up on stage with us. Greggy, I saw you reacting quite strongly, agreeing with English there. Welcome to the stage with us, my friend. And what are your thoughts?
Hey, Vitek, thanks for having me. Yes, it's my first time after what? Is it
months?
7, 8 months?
Yeah, one of our
I'm just
very,
listening
very first
in, man.
listeners.
Oh yes, and yeah, and thank you for having me. Just on this one, right? I think, as English has said, that's the usual thing that you observe when it comes to prices of NFTs. That when there's a sudden pump on the underlying crypto side, the corresponding NFT drops. And I think it's something that we also have observed temporarily in the Sol NFTs. So when Sol was pumping, there's that. Why is it a positive correlation? Like, it sounds weird, right? But then eventually, once Sol has stabilized around 100-ish for 2-3 weeks, we can see that even the top NFTs have also adjusted as well. It will adjust downwards and then stabilize afterwards, because NFTs do require stable underlying cryptocurrency, right, for it to build its value.
Absolutely.
Because yeah,
I think that completely makes sense, Greggy. We just need, like, once those big aggressive moves happen,
that's right,
and then there's like some other aggressive moves in the underlying NFT. Once things just stabilize, that seems to have always been the best period of time for the NFT to like find its right price and then consolidate before it can move back on. Thank you very much for that, English. I think you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, especially specifically with, we'll see it actually move, the actual token price be higher eventually when it stabilizes. That's specifically for the top collections. We're talking about the top collections. So
good clarification.
Yeah, it's, at least that's my thesis. if it represents the ecosystem as a whole. So you have Mad Lads, you have a lot of the founders rocking the PFP. People are really proud of it. You have Pudgies for Ethereum. I've had my thing that Node Monkeys will maybe be that for BTC as far as a high volume 10K collection. So not just any NFT. If it represents the ecosystem as a whole, you become bullish on Sol. So then you become bullish on Mad Lads. You become bullish on Ethereum, Pudgies, so on and so forth.
Absolutely makes a lot of sense to make that clarification, because it's typically the most prominent collections and the ones that are strongest, which will be able to maintain their value in ETH at the same time. Let's get into some of the headlines now, and just in case some people are new to the show, if you do have anything to contribute, just raise your hand and we will get round to you in due time. Okay, so starting with the SEC official approval yesterday, let's take people through the process. English, I think. So basically, the SEC approved 11 spot Bitcoin ETFs yesterday, with trading likely to start today. The document listed 11 spot Bitcoin ETFs, and it was said that after careful review, the Commission finds that the proposals are consistent with the Exchange Act and rules and regulations thereunder applicable to a national security exchange, of course. The interesting thing, I think we've spoken about the ETF to death this week. I think everyone's been hit around the head with it over and over again, especially because it all felt so inevitable. We knew it was going to happen. I just want to take us to a few interesting kind of implications of the ETF, because I think that is where we need to start moving our head towards now. The first thing is this very interesting response from a Commissioner Pierce, on the harms caused by dragging out the ETF. So I'm just going to get this up on YouTube for people to see, and we'll read it out online as well. This is Commissioner Pierce on the harms caused by dragging out the Bitcoin ETF. It says, first, our arbitrary and capricious treatment of applications in this area will continue to harm our reputation far beyond crypto. Second, our disproportionate attention on these filings has diverted limited staff resources away from other mission-critical work. Third, our actions here have muddied people's understanding of what the SEC's role is. Fourth, by failing to follow our normal standards and processes in considering spot Bitcoin ETFs, we have created an artificial frenzy around them. That probably does completely describe how we've all been behaving on the timeline in the last few days. Fifth, we have alienated, I think this one's quite important, we've alienated a generation of product innovators within our space. Our unreasonable approach to these applications has signaled that regulatory prejudice against new products and services can lead us to sidestep the law and unreasonably delay product launches. I wanted to just touch on that for a little bit, because I think that is what is it's kind of trying to reflect on the implications of the ETF and all of our generation who have seen the nonsense and the way that they have attempted to legislate and regulate via legislation, instead of trying to work with industry to make this stuff work. And I guess the implication here is that due to the course taken by the SEC, many people have almost been pushed into the arms of all kinds of nefarious actors as well. So I think that's maybe one of those points where, if things had been done properly, would FTX have even happened in the way that it does? And of course, there will always be nefarious actors, even when the regulations are perfect, right? That will definitely be the case. But I do think there's something to be said for taking responsibility as the lawmaking body and the regulator to try to make it the best possible environment for people to know what ground they're standing on, and so people can participate in a safer way. So I thought that was an interesting one to go to. I also definitely want to go to the almost biggest implication, which was that instead of the Bitcoin price going up, the ETH price started to go up. So we're going to get there in a second. But English, your reflections first on this kind of pretty searing criticism of just the whole SEC process to date.
So what I take away from this, the biggest thing is probably under the fourth one. It basically likens this to like marijuana or some kind of drug. This creating an artificial frenzy. So I think, in a sense, that so marijuana was a Schedule 1 drug. So there's no medicinal benefit to it. There's no any, things. It's terrible. It'll make you lazy. It's a gateway to heroin. This is the message that people have been, at least the government will do. Then there's like this turnaround action, but because they made it so taboo, people like said, oh my God, this is great. I want to try this. It's kind of like this counterintuitive. And then because it wasn't regulated, because it wasn't normalized, people might have gravitated to it like in this taboo, forbidden type of way, that had we just normalized it and said, hey, it's good for glaucoma, it's good for seizures, try not to use it, when you're driving or anything like that, maybe that wouldn't have happened. So that's the analogy that I get, from all of this. And I think it might be right. It might be right that had we just put some more regulations, because there's all different types of craziness that happens just with cash regardless, right? All the stuff that you can correlate to Bitcoin, even banks do like nefarious things with cash. So I don't think it has any reflection on Bitcoin itself or crypto in terms of what you do with it. If there is terrorism, I think Gary Gensler made at least he remarked that it's for sex trafficking, for for tax evasion, and for funding terrorists. These are all things that happen before crypto.
Yeah,
And so it's not crypto specific. And then putting that message that there's no other value proposition, instead of saying, hey, it's good for this, such and so forth, the same way that marijuana might be good here. That's really the parallel that I get here. So an interesting thing.
I like that analogy, the analogy for certain types of drugs. Obviously, there are some which might be more dangerous, but it's a useful analogy, I think. So I appreciated that. I want to throw to Bread, who we had a really awesome discussion with yesterday on the kind of ETH conversation. We're going to get there again in just a moment. But Bread, want to bring you in on this, kind of reflecting on the SEC's role to date. Welcome to the stage. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for letting me up, B-Check. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. And then you pointed out FTX there. And I think that you can go even deeper than that, where the reason FTX collapsed is because of the things that precipitated that, which was Three Arrows Capital and a few other institutions going under. And that was because of this very reason, right? There was no regulatory clarity, and you had the Bitcoin Trust, GBTC, that was spun up as a pseudo ETF way ahead of this because they wouldn't approve the ETFs that were filed. I think it's at 10 years ago, frankly, at this point. The Winklevosses did it, several years ago, right? That was their first application. Yeah. So all of these professional traders came in and tried to do the arbitrage opportunity between GBTC and actual BTC price, because there was no actual ETF that stood up that represented that. And because of that, they went under, which caused the Luna collapse, which caused FTX to collapse, which caused Celsius to collapse. So you could reasonably make the argument that the entire crash of the last run was because there was no regulatory clarity that they had for us. So it's Hester Pierce is a really great listen. She's been very critical from within the SEC for half a year now, and she has several podcasts that you can actually go listen to. Highly recommended for the crowd.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely want to check that out. I thought it was just a very interesting thing to see come out on the day. And I guess maybe one of the things that happens in institutions sometimes is when something finally gets reached and the people who are most affected are essentially placated, right? They're placated by the fact that they finally got what they want. They might forget to actually go and do the investigations as to why things were so bad in the first place. And this person was like, no, we're not going to forget about why some of these things went so wrong. Even if we finally got to the place that we needed to get to, there's some serious investigation that needs to go into why much of this harm was created from the various actions that we took in the past. So I thought that was quite important that it was said and stated, and people were conscious of that. So I did like to see that. I want to get onto the ETH conversation in a moment. But English, you wanted to touch on one of the other implications specifically for Bitcoin first, the fact that the ETF is now through. And remember, guys, this trading is supposed to go live later. Funnily enough, I keep hearing different numbers as to how much the various issuers have, on the sidelines ready to come in. First, it was 2 billion. Then I heard 3 billion on Spaces. I heard as high as 4 as well. A couple of out, like the later the day got yesterday, the higher the number that Spaces hosts had decided to say that people had waiting on the sidelines. So I thought that was kind of funny. But you wanted to make a point here, English, on the actual kind of mechanics of how the ETFs work.
Yeah, so this is an interesting point, and I have a little anecdotal story. So before being full-time Web3, I ran either some retail or service industries, and I ran a head shop in 2014, I think it was, and somebody wanted to sell wanted to pay in Bitcoin, and they're like, you should accept Bitcoin, it's the future. I had heard about Bitcoin a little bit, but this is like the first time that it really stuck in my head and that people
Mm.
were kind of excited about it. I told them it probably wasn't possible, and I went about my day. I looked at the price of Bitcoin, and I think it was just above $1,000, and I didn't have it. And I was like, you know what? I don't have the money. I want to buy this, but I don't have $1,500 to spend on it. And I laughed because and this was part of like that tweet. So if you want to pull that up, it's kind of a little tongue-in-cheek joke. Finally, people will be able to have a fractional piece of Bitcoin, which obviously you could have always done and invested whatever you want, DCA a portion of it. But what's going to happen is people are going to package these in $20 to $40 increments. That's the number that I heard Easy say. I don't know myself, just kind of, whatever it turns to be. But the thing is, they'll be say, hey, I have 1,000 Bitcoin, but really it's the share value based on that ETE. And it's like that number fallacy that people really like. They're like, I could buy this Bitcoin. It's $40 a share. I don't know if that's the proper terminology, but let's just run with that. And so then you buy, 1,000 of them, and you feel good because you have 1,000 Bitcoin. So it's a psychological, and as ridiculous as that sounds, from the retail casual investor, that's what they're going to think they have.
Do you know what? I don't think that's as ridiculous as it sounds. I think that stuff definitely exists in people's minds. And interestingly, I don't know what you think about this, English. Maybe this is controversial. Maybe this doesn't make sense at all. It's one of the reasons why I sold off a lot of my Solana NFTs, because I thought this is so much soul, like 100 soul, 200 soul. If this rips, like that's so much soul. Whereas Bitcoin's already so damn high. And if something's like 0.02, and I completely appreciate that's a hell of a lot of money in BTC, but because of the unit bias, it just feels like psychologically people might not mind as much. What's your kind of instinctive take on that?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. It's a little bit of a different I guess it's two sides of the same coin, right? So there's more upside on Solana. I think people see targets of 700, and who knows, right? Like it could do, and I think at that point it's kind of like, um, Ethereum in 2021, 2020. But really, there's nothing that stops it. So like Solana specifically has. So what happens with alts is people get excited. There's airdrops. People speculate on them, but people don't necessarily have like builders that are just dedicated to that ecosystem. So Solana does have that. So I don't know that there's going to be products on Say, for instance, but Solana, if it does this crazy, I guess, vampire attack on the retail market of cryptocurrency, there's no reason that it couldn't be $1,500, $1,200. It might take 2 or 3 years, right? But then you like think about all the people that hodled their Ethereum when went from 80 to 300 and didn't sell. That's the potential, and I think there's always a little bit about it. Like we've all sold that one NFT that at 0.2 and it ran to 3 ETH, and maybe you had 4 of them, and so it does have that upside to it. So I don't blame you. I think it still makes sense. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you stacked Solana the way that you might have stacked ETH, a few years back, you would probably be in a pretty good position.
That's what I was kind of thinking, I was thinking like, because for people's context, like I only got into crypto and NFTs. Well, I got into crypto via NFTs. Like that was my first purchase. And then I've learned about everything backwards. And then I've obviously become aware of all these people who just have stacks and stacks of ETH, accumulated at a very, very low price. And I would be lying to you if I hadn't thought about Solana in the same way. And it's not because, we don't know how these things are going to move. We don't know if Solana goes to the exact dollar values of where ETH is. Maybe there'll always be this ratio where it'll always be a certain amount lower. But I have definitely thought about that, where it just seems like, damn, a Mad Lad is 180 Sol. Like, what if? What if? I don't know. I've been asking myself that question. Eddie, I saw you. I think you might have wanted to contribute there. First time with us on the morning show. Welcome to the stage. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, actually, my initial contribution, because I thought you were talking specifically about like pricing around the ETF and stuff like that. So that was where my head was at first. So I'll actually mention that super fast. The main problem or the main concern, because I saw a tweet today that was like, why would I worry about self custody when I can just use the ETF? The answer is management fees. Those are going to be massive. But so anyway, more focusing on what you were just getting at. I agree with you, but I do think I actually treat some of my NFT holdings, specifically if they're liquid enough, as exposure to the underlying asset. So you're talking Mad Labs. I have one.
Sure.
I had it. I bought it at like 150. I think is where I bought it at. And I actually like my current Sol stack. Just full transparency is probably around like 200 Sol, 220 Sol, somewhere in that range. And I consider it like when I say 220 Sol or whatever, 150, 160 of it is the Mad Lab.
I see what you mean.
It's not, you know what I mean? Like it's not. At least that's how I consider it. Once they reach a certain level, I treat it at that level, and I do the same with certain ETH NFTs as well, like seals and penguins, for example. I would actually treat in that way, as well as a few others. So the idea is, it's not like when you go on Blur and you look at your portfolio, it says the ETH value. It doesn't just say the NFT. You know.
Yeah.
So that's how I start to treat some of these things.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think I have seen a few people kind of putting that reminder out there, where if you do have some good NFTs and you also have that the token exposure, it's worth, like, when you're thinking about your overall allocations, just adding that number to that token as well, just to so that you're completely on top of your allocations. That's an interesting thought. Before we get into some of the other headlines, maybe I think it's important, we've got to go to the ETH price, because that is, despite, you know, the Bitcoin ETF approval being such a humongous headline, I don't know. And I said this yesterday on the spaces with Thread Guy English. I think it was yesterday. Was it the day before English, where you wanted to disagree with me just a little bit? So we'll just kind of rehash that a little bit for people, where I said that I don't think that there was anyone who so confidently said that this would be one of the things that would have happened, where we have the ETF go through. Everyone was kind of debating about Bitcoin price from what I could see. A few guesses about what might have happened with other things, but I didn't see anyone concretely say that ETH is going to absolutely rip on the day or anything like that. I know people are saying that we've got the ETF approval next. Maybe some attention might go there after the Bitcoin approval, because we know that that's the next one up. I appreciate that was kind of out there in the universe, but I didn't think myself, and I didn't see anyone saying that this was going to happen all so quickly, particularly just like that day, that previous, the move from the past 24 hours. English, you wanted to come in though with maybe some additional context there.
Yeah. So my comment was, when you said, you know, nobody saw this coming, there was plenty of people that saw it coming. There was just nobody that comes across our timeline, because we're in this little crypto Twitter bubble, and maybe even more specific NFT, and there's these like tribal factions. So what happens is narratives are always backwards. So like the market's forward looking, but narratives are backwards focused. And so all of a sudden it became that ETH is the middle child. If you want retail, if you want speed, if you want cheap transactions, very fast, better UI, better UX, you go Solana. If you want luxury and security, now you have Bitcoin ordinals. So you don't really have a case use of products for Ethereum. And that's why it's lagging. So nobody saw it coming, because the tech of Solana at $125, boy, that tech looked good. When it dipped to 85 the other day, I don't know, it was kind of shaky. It was like, oh, well, it's maybe a little too centralized. It's inflationary tokenomics. So it's always this backward narrative. But Arthur Hayes did post basically at Solana at $115 roughly. He posted and he's like, I just sold all my Solana, and I'm going to rotate it into ETH. And everybody laughed on the timeline. If you look at his comments, it's like, oh, this is cope, all of this other stuff.
I've actually just got some of the comments here, English. The first top comment is, your macro knowledge is elite, but your coin picks are subpar.
Yeah, it's hilarious, because had you done that, you'd be up, right? What is Solana now at 100? He sold it at a higher price, and he has some more percentage. So this goes back to people just understanding the fundamentals, understanding that it was a lagging asset, potentially an ETF for Ethereum. So you got to remember that there was 2 coins specifically, not a security, Bitcoin and Ethereum. At one point they came out, and Solana, Polygon, all these alts that were not on that list, they dumped. And then Solana ripped way more than a lot of other ones. So there's like this, it's just, where do you rotate your money? Where does the smart money rotate their money? And it was obvious that it would be Ethereum. I don't think anybody necessarily knew that the ETF being approved on Bitcoin would be the catalyst, but traditionally Ethereum moves in January, where Bitcoin is in late November, early December. And so if you're a trading type of guy and you don't really care about narrative, you just look at numbers and patterns, this is not only something that was predictable, but actually predicted.
Very interesting. I do know that, I mean, there's different ways to view the price movements. Obviously, some people look at the charts like really, really intensely and have these perceptions of like, well, they just purely move off off the charts. You also have the halvening coming up, and people have all kinds of predictions as to how things will almost definitively move as a consequence of that. And then you have people who are more just like value investors being like, well, I think ETH is awesome. You know, whether the ratio goes up or down, I'm not really too concerned. It's gonna, like, you know, I'm just long on this. I'm not gonna keep allocating my capital and switching around every 5 seconds, because that's just not an efficient way to spend my time and an efficient way to allocate capital. Let's talk the prices then. English, you said ETH has gone up 10%. I think you wanted to comment a little bit more specifically on the price action.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I'll just make one quick point of your last point. I think if you're like someone that's in Ethereum and you're farming the airdrop, whether it's Blur, Blast, Eigenlayer, you buy and sell NFTs, you're happy staying there, right? Because that 10 or 20, 30% move doesn't matter as much if you're getting 2, 3x's, maybe more. And so it doesn't really matter. It's just where you feel comfortable with. So if you enjoy ordinals, maybe you'll be there. If you enjoy Solana, so that's all I will say. I'm talking this. My point was more for people with large amounts of money and feel comfortable trading in crypto, and will probably just stick to like name brand crypto stuff. And they throw 100 grand at this, moves 20 or 30%, 30 grand. So, but if you're like a little degen and are happy with the underlying asset, because either the culture or whatever the case, I think it's okay to stick where you are and not chase the other coin. But yeah, the price action. So we talked a little bit about TA.
God, pushed almost 12% now. $2,642 is Ethereum right now.
Okay, so I'll start with some bad news. So we'll start with
Give it to
Bitcoin,
us.
Daddy Bitcoin, because that's what's leading, creating all this. So the idea is that there's a specific resistance, and it's based on previous cycles, 3 or 4 cycles in Bitcoin. And if it hits 48, it touches there. So previously in those 2 or 3 cycles, it would hit that. It just happens to be 48,000 for this cycle, but it's based on percentages and previous cycles. There's maybe left about up to 55 would be the upside. Traditionally, in all of these cycles leading up to the halvening, there's always a 20 to 40% dump. That's why when you hear people say, "Hey, this is a sell the news event," and it will potentially with dumps, that's what they're referencing, whether they know it or not. And so what'll happen is maybe you have a little bit of upside left. And this is a move that's going to happen in Q1. And so what does that mean in actual terms numbers? You're talking about 40% dump from 55. You're looking at 35. If there's liquidations on longs and shorts, you're talking about a flash dip down to like just above 30. Will that happen? Probably not. There's one specific thing that was the outlier here, in terms, or rather the wild card. Will the ETF actually change this narrative? It basically, is it different this time, right? There's like that joke, this time it's different. I think we've proven that this time is not different, because we're not seeing like 60K Bitcoin just off the ETF news. It was slightly priced in. So all of this goes back to TA now. We're testing the bear market rally. So what's the bear market rally? Early in 2022, we saw a slight dip. There was like this one crazy run where everybody was like, okay, no, we're good. We're not going into a bear market. And it was basically just one last like dead cat bounce. So if for the people watching on YouTube, if you want to pull up the all-time charts, basically that puts Solana at 140 at the top of it. It puts Ethereum at like 3,200, 3,300. Because Solana didn't hit quite 140 and hit 120, the projection is we should see BTC hit about 26, 27. We're seeing that now. If it remains bullish, we're going to look at maybe touch 3,000, maybe go a little bit above it, maybe just under it. And then
Talking
all
about
of
ETH, right? Talking about ETH.
Ethereum. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ethereum. So at 2100, 2200, the prediction was, and why Arthur Hayes rotated, is at 2100, we'll see a move to the upside. We're going to see blow past 2500, potentially hit 2700. So we're closing in on that. It'll probably go a little bit sideways, a little bit of retrace. If it has one more push for Q1, we're looking at 29 to 3100 Ethereum before we start seeing some weakness to the downside. Again, 20 to 40% correction.
So
over Q1. Q1. This is
sure.
weeks and months, not days, not all of a sudden.
Sure. So just for clarity, we just want to explain like very, very quickly, because we want to move on. Then like what's from where is that thinking coming from? Is that from like, if you were to hold this halvening, like having the halvening in the back of your mind? Is this just pure technical analysis? From where is that kind of thought process coming from, so people can kind of make up their own minds?
Yeah, it's technical TA, basically technical analysis. So basically just looking at percentages based on 3 or 4 cycles of Bitcoin, a couple cycles of Ethereum. Solana's a little bit newer. So it's in a different life cycle. But if you look at the charts, and you can pull it up yourself, although they're different assets, they predominantly, at least when you zoom out, have the same pattern. The theory is that Solana, Ethereum, they're basically the same thing. They're crypto. Like, you're not trading Nvidia stock, you're not trading Tesla. And so the people that trade, they just look at this as like a different, like, that's the car sector, that's the entertainment sector, that's the computer sector, this is the crypto sector. So they're just saying, hey, listen, is it going to do what it's done before? And if it does what it's done before, this is what's going to happen.
I actually really like that as a like simple, straightforward way of looking at things. Like the most straightforward analysis of things that I've heard is just like, do I think this thing is good? It's at this price. What was its all-time high? If we're going to a good market, well, we're probably just going to go back there. Like, I know that's like completely simplistic. It's probably too straightforward, but I know so many people who operate off that with that kind of thing in mind. And to some extent, I would be lying to you if I said I never operate like that as well. Like, I think it's a useful at least one of the useful things to keep in mind. Eddie, I see your hand raised. I want to come to you in just a second, but before we do that, we're drawing towards the close. I want to bring people up to speed first with what else has been going on in the Web3 space from the snapshot, to get up to speed with the rest of the news from the past 24 hours. So as you can see up top, we have Bored Apes down 6% with rapid rise in ETH price and big lenders removing loan offers. That's pretty significant, but we've spoken about a multitude of ETH NFTs kind of bleeding at the moment. Number 2, 1.5 trillion investment firm Franklin Templeton creates Laser Eyes PFP. Seems like we're in Laser Eyes season. And we know what that means. When too many people have those, probably time to take them off the table. Wasabi hits $2 million volume in first week of NFT perps trading. That's pretty cool. And the president of El Salvador tweets, so we got in way before BlackRock, just flexing on BlackRock like that. Getting into the more news section on the more creative side, Xcopy announced burn to mint of Sideways for Max Payne holders. Jack Butcher released OPEPN Set 29 approved, kind of a homage to the Bitcoin approval. And finally, Forgotten Runes reveal a 0.2 Bitcoin max bid price for sub 1K shadow hats on Bitcoin. That is really, really fascinating. I think we probably want to go to English on that in a second because of his expertise on the ordinal side and learn something new there. But before we do that, I want to throw to Eddie. Do you want to put a bow on that price action discussion for us, Eddie?
Yeah, just will note, and I think it's I think overall the ETF is super bullish, but this thing is funny, right? Like, not only can you buy with institutional size with the ETF, but you can also short with institutional size on these ETFs, which is, it's just worth remembering. But
yeah, completely fair enough. Fair take. English, let's get to the Forgotten Runes piece of news. I think you're one of the best placed to be able to speak to that. And I still think, even though with a lot of the hype that's been going on with ordinals, that lots of people are still either sidelined from ordinals or just like don't really know, like are not confident to navigate that ecosystem just yet. So why don't you set it up for us? Just explain like what exactly is going on here and why could it be so significant?
Well, I'll give some context. So, a little bit of my thinking. So, I've talked a little bit about this on this show previously as a guest speaker, not as a co-host, but in NFTs, in any non-fungible asset, not necessarily token, whether that's a house, something that's unique, you can price it at what somebody will pay, but you have to come up with at least what you think is fair market value. How do you do that? You do that with comps, right? So if you have a house, it's in a certain neighborhood, a certain size, it's updated, you have a rough idea. So with comps, the comp that I used just to set the framework for Node Monkeys, which was the same mechanic here in terms of Dutch auction, they use bucket auction, and I'll get into that a little bit, was frogs. Frogs hit 0.15, then ran to 0.25 before topping off at half. So to me, it was a full send for Node Monkeys. So it was a green light. I would say this is a yellow light. Be very,
So
very
just explain first, English. Shadow Hats is by Forgotten Runes.
correct. Yeah.
Is going
So
to be 600, which will be sold.
666 is the actual collection size, but 600 are up for auction. Correct. And I'll elaborate on that. So yeah, so OG team, one of the few 2021s that still have a very thriving community. They're still producing. I'm actually friends with Bear Snake, one of the founders, and at least friendly with the other founders. I love them. They've been on my show. I've been on their show multiple times. I chat with them. So I love the team. I think the art's cool. They use a unique parent-child inscription of the sub 1010 Shadow Hats. So there's a little bit of value there, but mostly because Cypher and CB Spears, two like Ordi core OGs that help like start ordinals, they basically made this artistic version of the inscribing. And I won't get too into it. You can look at it if you want, but for the sake of time, we'll leave it there. So it has a lot of fervor behind it, because if you asked me 4 months ago, what am I looking at? I would say only Node Monkeys and Shadow Hats.
Interesting.
Are these shadows? Go ahead.
So to understand more appropriately from someone from the outside, is the real interesting element to it? Like, yes, we like the team. They're definitely OGs. They've like always been good kind of founders as well in the space. I think that goes without saying. But is the real value here in that they've got these sub 1K inscriptions? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's part of it. Like if it was just a collection that didn't have any kind of reference to like a historical piece, but the most important part here, and this is the part that worries me, is that if you bid a goated bid, so it's a fair Dutch auction, it'll end at whatever the fair price is, the last bid. So everybody pays the least amount. They call it bucket, but it's stuff. Is this 0.2 goated? You are incentivized to FOMO the top. It's the thing that I was worried about Node Monkeys. If everyone FOMO the top, price would have gone down, because it would have been maybe, or potentially, right? People are scared of the word Dutch auction because they think of like Pixelmon and all these other kind of DAs where everybody FOMO the top. What happens if a collection is hot, the market is hot, people will FOMO the top, and that's what I'm worried about here. So basically, they have 10 Shadow Hats. It's about like a two BTC asset you could potentially win. So if you bid 0.2, regardless whether you get it at 0.2 or 0.05, you will be entered to win one of these 10 Shadow Hats, sub 1K collection, potentially get 2 BTC.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's this incentive to FOMO the top. Yeah, these are the Shadow Hats. They're very cool. Yeah, I could say a lot about it. Maybe if you have specific questions, I can give you my market analysis of what I think market value is and why it is, if you'd like.
Do it, please.
Quick one.
Yeah, so I would compare this to Peepos. So Peepos is by Inscribed Pepes. They have a sub 10K collection. They're not parent-childs, but they do have a unique value proposition. First, under 1,000 uncommons ever inscribed. So there is some provenance. They look like the Inscribed Pepes. Inscribed Pepes were 2 BTC, which is, again, my same valuation of the Shadow Hats. These minted 0.12. In the bear market, they went all the way to 0.014. They're roughly right under 0.1. I would say the true market value of this at this point in time, I'm not saying later on it can't do well. The team can do something special with it. Maybe it gets a certain gravity, to it, and it takes off because of the bull market. and it's over 0.2 valuation. But if I had to give an actual comp with an actual reasoning behind it, this would be my comp. Don't bid 0.2 unless you're comfortable taking this degen chance, and if it goes and you're comfortable holding in case that it's under 0.2 for the next month, 2 months, 6 months. Like if you're happy with that particular asset at 0.2, go ahead, throw that in. But if you don't really know much about ordinals and you just are hoping to 2 or 3x, I'd be cautious. I'd be cautious. And this is with a team that I love, and I love the collection.
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes sense. It's an expensive item. And as you said, with the unit bias on top of that, Bitcoin NFTs are going to get damn expensive pretty quickly. We are completely running out of time of today's show. I just want to give Short Stack a quick chance to come in there. Short Stack, welcome to the stage. I believe it's your first time with us. A final concluding point on this, because we are about to wrap.
Okay, I can just conclude on the recent events with the ETF, the approvals. I am super happy to be owning ETH right now, and looking forward to getting into Bitcoin by swapping some of my ETH. I think what's going to happen differently with ETH is that because Bitcoin was approved, and so many applicants were actually approved, all of them, as a matter of fact, I think that's super bullish for the efforts to get ETH ETFs going. So it will be different. People will start getting into position on ETH now. Relatively early. I will also say that Bitcoin, I would love to be owning it right now, simply because this time it is different. I don't think anyone's going to ever use the word crypto winter again, because welcome to Bitcoin and the larger crypto space, the good coins anyways, being viewed as an actual asset. Now, people use the word normies, but do you know how much money is locked up in retirement accounts, IRAs, 401k? When that is the thundering herd. We're just a few cowboys riding along, and there's like a gigantic thundering herd of wild cattle coming towards us. Okay, that's what's going to be happening and developing right now as we speak. People are logging into their IRAs and they're saying, hey, you know what? Stock market's at an all-time high. You know what? I'm gonna sell like 3% of my stock market holdings, seeing as what's the Dow at like 3,800. They're gonna not take profits. They're just gonna reallocate. Hey, this is a new asset class. This is for real. And you know what, people, not your keys, not your coins. I think we're in some ways past that. Not everyone's going to get a wallet. Not everyone's going to own an NFT, but a lot more people than most think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are going to be investing in this. It's new money coming in.
Yeah,
okay?
I think that's really, really important to understand. And also, I like the weather analogy. Just thinking about it now, you're right. Maybe crypto winter can be put behind us. Maybe some kind of eternal spring would be the best way to describe where we're moving into.
It's going to be a way where normies are going to, what do you mean winter? Because you don't talk about like the stock market, like, oh, it's a bull or a bear market or sideways choppy. People are going to start talking and using that term of art to discuss crypto. When that happens, that most of the people at that cocktail party or the bar you're at are not like talking about ordinals or they're just talking about, am I in position and what's my asset allocation between stocks, precious metals, real estate, and this new asset class called crypto. Right.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So you say crypto winter, what do you mean winter? Do you mean bear market? Is that what you're talking about, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting one to think about, Short Stack. Thank you so much for your contribution. I did say we're kind of running out of time, but hopefully we can have you on again to get into some of this stuff. We got to wrap, guys. This has been a great conversation as always. We do this, if you're new here, we do this Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week. We get into everything to do with crypto, NFTs, and also just how to make some money on the internet. We get some prominent creators with us quite often too. Just want to shout out English for being our special guest co-host today. Really, really appreciate you, my man. I don't know if you've been tracking the YouTube comments, English, and I don't know how many times you've got this one, but I've got one for you specifically. WTF is a taproot wizard, and where can I buy one?
Dude, that's the joke. I'm in your server. That's literally the first question I got. I actually stay away from new servers, and I guess now I have to extend this to like any new platform, because that's literally how I'm welcome. And Udi even made like a joke, I think at one time in the timeline, like, I don't know what a taproot wizard is. I don't have one. I can't give you one. I think I might make that my new banner.
That should be incorporated into your bio at some point in time as well. But guys, very seriously, don't ask English that question. Do go and follow him for all kinds of other great content for the Bitcoin ecosystem, but as well as the Nouns ecosystem too. Don't forget that. And he's a great Spaces host himself. Take care, guys. Have a wonderful day. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.